Welcome, especially if this is your first time listening to these talks. When dealing with someone who is persistently evil, we often deceive ourselves. It's as if we blind ourselves to what's really going on because we want to think the best of that person. And so we see them in their evil acts, in their anger, in their uncontrolled temper, and we say, oh, it's just emotion. It'll pass, it'll go away. And then they make an attempt at reformation. And however weak that attempt is, and however brief it is, we convince ourselves that it's genuine, that they really, really mean it. And what's more, they'll succeed, they'll change, we tell ourselves. In this way, we convince ourselves that there's no danger, when really there is great danger. And we see in the book of 1 Samuel, we're up to chapter 20, we see that both David and his friend Jonathan had deceived themselves about King Saul. David had seen time after time how Saul planned and plotted and tried to kill him. But each time we see David returning to Saul, building up an ever closer friendship, returning to those same situations of danger where he was before. And Jonathan, Saul's son, well, he managed to convince himself that he understood his father. He thought that Saul would always tell him of his plans, just as he had done at the beginning of chapter 19, and he had confidence in his ability to talk his father round and to talk his father out of his cruel and evil plans. David and Jonathan had deceived themselves. It was curious in chapter 19 to see how Saul's daughter Michal, who was the wife of David, how she hadn't been deceived. She was the sister, of course, of Jonathan, but she was utterly convinced that her father was uncontrollable and evil. It was her who persuaded David, and she had to persuade him, that he should run away from Saul. And now David has realised it. He's realised the great danger that he's in, and he decides to go back to Jonathan. Jonathan, his friend. Jonathan, the son of King Saul. And to discuss with him the matter and to work out what he should do. So, my name is Keith Simons. I'm a Bible teacher from England. I present these talks on how to understand the King James Bible, looking each time at a different chapter, verse by verse and word by word, seeking to understand its meaning. Today we're starting to look at the first book of Samuel, 1 Samuel, chapter 20. It's a long chapter, so we're splitting it into two talks, and today's talk will be on verses 1 to 23. That's the first book of Samuel, chapter 20, verses 1 to 23. Verse 1. And David fled from Naioth in Ramah, where he'd been with the prophet Samuel, and where Saul had come afterwards, initially intending to catch David and to kill him, but a spirit of prophecy had come upon Saul, and Saul had ended up with a sort of reformation, praying and singing under inspiration of God, prophesying in the words of the King James Version. But David, aware of the danger, left that place and went to Jonathan. let's continue with verse 1 now. And David fled from Naioth in Ramah, and came and said before Jonathan, What have I done? What is mine iniquity, and what is my sin before thy father, that he seeketh my life? Thy father, of course, is Saul, the father of Jonathan. He's seeking David's life, that is, he is seeking to take away David's life, that is, Saul is seeking to kill David. And David says to Jonathan, Am I guilty of some evil act? I don't know. Have I acted in rebellion against the king? Or am I guilty of some other great crime of which I'm unaware? This should not be. It should not be that Saul is trying to kill me, but he's dealing with me as he would deal with the worst rebel in his kingdom. Why is this? Well, we know why it was. It was because of Saul's jealousy of David, because he knew that the Spirit of God which had left Saul had come upon David. And Saul realized that David, and not a member of Saul's own family, would become king after him. And Saul couldn't cope with that. That was the reason. It wasn't any wrong thing that David had done. It was Saul's jealous and cruel and evil temperament. Jonathan replies in verse 2, And he said unto him, God forbid. Thou shalt not die. Behold, my father will do nothing either great or small, but that he will shew it me. And why should my father hide this thing from me? It's not so. Okay, let's take apart Jonathan's reply here. He begins in the King James Bible, God forbid. There's no mention of God there in the Hebrew. The Hebrew could be translated far from it. It's far from the truth that you're guilty of iniquity and that my father, King Saul, is seeking to kill you. It's far from it. So why does the King James Bible say, God forbid? Because that's what an English person would have said in those circumstances at the time of the King James Bible. They would have said, God forbid, to express so strongly. Far from it. It's not going to happen. You're not going to die. In other words, Jonathan is saying David will not die in punishment for a crime, a sin. And the proof of it is, look, behold, my father will do nothing either great or small that he will shew it me. Jonathan is the king's eldest son. King Saul does nothing except consulting with Jonathan. We think Saul had been reigning for about 35 years at this point. And at the beginning of his rule, he gave a third part of the army over to Jonathan for him to lead. Saul absolutely trusts Jonathan. And so he does nothing, not great things, not big things, not small things, without showing Jonathan first what his plans are. And that, of course, gives Jonathan an opportunity to influence him. So Jonathan says to David, why should my father hide this from me? If my father were really intending to kill you, he would have discussed it with me. He discussed it in chapter 19, verse 1, and I was able to talk him out of it. So Jonathan concludes, whatever you've heard, whatever you think, it's not so. Maybe my father was angry, and maybe the evil spirit came upon him, and so he tried to kill you, but that evil spirit only comes from time to time. And so you don't need worry about that. There's no problem. But verse 3, David is not convinced by Jonathan's protestation that Saul is not planning to kill him. So, and David sware, moreover. Okay, if we say someone swears today, we mean that they used profane, obscene words. That is not the meaning here. The meaning here is as in swearing an oath. David made a serious promise before God and said, "Thy father certainly knoweth that I have found grace in thine eyes. And he saith, Let not Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved." So Jonathan had asked why Saul should hide from him his plans to kill David, when Saul hides nothing from Jonathan. And David gives a direct reply to that. "Your father knows that I have found grace or favour in your eyes." In other words, he knows that we're friends. He knows that you're protecting me and looking after me. He knows that you care about me and that you're pleased with me and with my work for the king. And so David argues that Saul is saying to himself, well, I'm not going to tell Jonathan because he'll be grieved. In other words, he'll be hurt, he'll be upset by this. End of verse 3. But as truly as the Lord liveth, there's the oath we talked about at the beginning. He's declaring this, and God is the witness of the fact. But truly as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, just as truly as the fact that Jonathan is alive, there is but a step between me and death. Little word picture there. I'm like someone who is walking on the edge of a cliff, and if I put one foot wrong, I will die. Jonathan seems to realise that David means exactly what he says here. And so Jonathan, even though he's still unsure that his father, King Saul, is planning to kill David, nevertheless replies and promises to help David in this situation. Verse 4. Then said Jonathan unto David, Whatsoever thy soul desireth, I will even do it for thee. What thy soul desireth, what you desire deep within you. He's saying, I'll do what you want. I'll do what you truly want. I will help you in this situation. Just tell me what it is you are thinking. Verse 5. And David said unto Jonathan, Behold, tomorrow is the new moon. The new moon, the beginning of the month. The months were counted in Israel by the time when the moon began to rise in the sky. People didn't have calendars then. They looked at the progress of the moon from the new moon to the full moon to the waning moon, and that was how they calculated when the month was. So the beginning of the month, the new moon, when the moon first appeared in the sky, that was a time of great joy in Israel, a time of feasting and celebrating at the beginning of the month. David continues, And I should not fail to sit with the king at meat. The king has a special meal, like every family in Israel has a special meal for the beginning of the month. And the king considers it important that all his officials should be there. And in spite of the fact that King Saul has just in the previous chapter been trying to kill David, nevertheless, it is David's duty. It is expected of him that he should be at King Saul's feast. And King Saul considers this of such great importance. But David proposes he won't be there. He says to Jonathan, end of verse 5, Let me go, that I may hide myself in the field unto the third day at even. I'll go away until 3 days' time in the evening, and and be absent from this feast. It seems that Saul had the feast. Other families had it just on one day, but Saul had it on 2 days. And David proposes to be absent from both of them, and on the 3rd day he will return to find out what's happened. And that will give Jonathan the opportunity to find out about this. Verse 6, if thy father at all miss me, if he's aware that I've not turned up for the meal, then say, David earnestly asked leave of me that he might run to Bethlehem, his city, for there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the family. So it's a special occasion for David's family. It happens that once a year they take an animal and they kill it and they all feast together. And David's brother has been urging him to be there, but David's protested previously that it's his duty to the king to be at the king's feast. Now, it might seem, because David said that he'll hide himself in the field, that David didn't intend to go to Bethlehem. We've got to look at the meaning of field. Field in the Bible means the open countryside as opposed to the town. So the idea of leaving Gibeah, the town where Saul has his capital, and going out into the field, that can mean going out into the countryside. It could mean going down to Bethlehem, where David's family are, and joining in with this feast. Verse 7. So Saul's been told by Jonathan in David's description that David has gone to be with his family instead of being at the king's feast. How is Saul going to reply? This is what David tells Jonathan, verse 7. If he say thus, it is well, thy servant shall have peace. So if Saul hears David's excuse and says, good, I'm perfectly happy with that, well, that's an indication that David, who describes himself as thy servant, Jonathan's servant, he's not really a servant of Jonathan. It's a respectful way to talk to the king's son. So David says, if Saul says, good, it's well, he's pleased to hear that David is with his family, then that's a mark that David is safe. He doesn't have to worry about the situation. This plan to kill David has been forgotten. But if he be very wrath, angry, if he's burning with anger, if he's fierce to hear that David is not present at his feast, then, says David, be sure that evil is determined by him. Then you can be sure that he has an evil plan and he's determined it. It's a definite plan to kill me. David continues, verse 8, therefore thou shalt deal kindly with thy servant, for thou hast brought thy servant into a covenant of the Lord with thee. David continues to describe himself as Jonathan's servant, dealing with him politely and in a dignified way. He says, be kind to me. You've made a covenant in front of God with me. A covenant, an agreement of promises of friendship. We saw that in chapter 18, verse 3. You promised friendship to me. You've promised friendship before the Lord. Therefore be kind to me. Help me in this situation. Notwithstanding, David continues, end of verse 8, notwithstanding, in spite of the fact that you've promised to be my friend and to look after me, notwithstanding, if there be in me iniquity, slay me thyself. I know of no crime of which I'm guilty. I haven't rebelled against the king. I haven't plotted a revolution. But perhaps I'm guilty of something of which I'm unaware. If I am guilty, don't deceive me. Be honest with me and deal with me firmly. Even if you must kill me, do it. I'd much rather that you, my friend, should kill me than that you should hand me over to your father to be dealt with in anger and in cruelty. For, says David at the end of verse 8, why shouldest thou bring me to thy father? Verse 9, and Jonathan said, far be it from thee. That's the same Hebrew word as was translated in verse 2, God forbid. It's not so. I'm not going to punish you like that. For if I knew certainly that evil were determined by my father to come upon thee, then would I not tell thee? I'll tell you about it. Don't worry. I'm going to find out whether my father has an evil plan, and then you will find out. Verse 10, then said David to Jonathan, who shall tell me? Or what if thy father answer thee roughly? What's going to happen? How are we going to find out about this? Verse 11, and Jonathan said unto David, come, and let us go out into the field. And they went, both of them, into the field, into the open countryside. Naturally, as friends, to talk together, to discuss this thing, to be in a place where they're not going to be overheard. But more than that, because there's an echo here of the Cain and Abel incident. We've had the suggestion by David that Jonathan should kill him, and now they're going out into the field. The place where Cain killed Abel was in the field. And so, how is Jonathan going to behave? Is he going to kill David? No, he's going to act in friendship. Friendship before God, verse 12. And Jonathan said unto David, O Lord God of Israel. So he's praying that God will be the witness of what's being said now. Then he speaks to David. When I have sounded my father about tomorrow, when I've tested him, when I've found out his views about tomorrow any time or the third day, during the period which they've agreed, and behold, if there be good toward David, and I then send not thee, and shew it thee, if I fail in my responsibilities to tell David that he's not in danger, then, verse 13, Jonathan says, the Lord do so and much more to Jonathan. That's the way of saying, may God punish me, and may he do it even more severely than I can imagine if I fail to tell David that he's safe with King Saul. Jonathan continues, but if it please my father to do the evil, then I will shew it thee, and send thee away. If my father's got an evil plan, I'm going to let you know, and I'm going to send you away, that thou mayest go in peace, and the Lord be with thee as he hath been with my father. Notice the comparison there. Jonathan is comparing David to Saul, to the king. He is so convinced that God has chosen David to be the next king that he can even pray and bless David with the words, the Lord be with thee as he hath been with my father. And then Jonathan sees to the future. And he says, verse 14, and thou shalt not only while yet I live shew me the kindness of the Lord, that I die not. Oh, you're my friend in life, I know that. You care about me. Even though my father is your enemy, you will protect me and you will not kill me. But he says, verse 15, also, I'm going to extend the covenant that I've made with you, the promises that I've made with you, and this is what I want. Also, thou shalt not cut off thy kindness from my house forever. In other words, the promises you've made to me, I want to be for me and for my family after me and future generations, that you will still show kindness to them. And that was fulfilled. David, after the death of Jonathan, sought out his son. You can read about it in the second book of Samuel, chapter 9. And he gave his son a place at his table in his palace. But also, thou shalt not cut off thy kindness from my house forever. No, not when the Lord hath cut off the enemies of David, every one from the face of the earth. I have confidence that God will act against all your enemies, that God will remove them from the earth. But even when he's done all of that, you're still to show kindness to my family. Verse 16, so in that way, Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David. You notice the use of house there. Not just with David personally, but with David and his successors and his family after him. This promise is made, saying, let the Lord even require it at the hand of David's enemies. That's reinforcing the end of verse 15. When Jonathan sees that God is going to make judgment against David's enemies, he's confident about it. He's trusting it. And when that happens, David is not to forget Jonathan's family. So Jonathan has declared this, and he now wants David to accept it and to make that promise to him for the benefit of his future family. Verse 17, and Jonathan caused David to swear again, to make a promise in front of God. This promise is that David is not going to punish Jonathan's family even when all his enemies have been punished by the Lord. Because he, Jonathan, loved him, David, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. Jonathan truly cared about David. David's deepest desires were Jonathan's desires, and Jonathan wanted David to be king when Saul's rule had ended. In verse 18, they now begin to speak about the feast, and they begin to explain the arrangements by which David will know whether there is danger for him. Verse 18, then Jonathan said to David, tomorrow is the new moon, at the beginning of the month, and thou shalt be missed, because thy seat will be empty. And when thou hast stayed 3 days, when you've been down to Bethlehem, then thou shalt go down quickly, return to Gibeah, to Saul's capital, and come to the place where thou didst hide thyself when the business was in hand, and shalt remain by the stone Esau. The place where thou didst hide thyself, the place where you hid yourself before. That presumably is reference back to chapter 19, verse 2, where David was told previously by Jonathan to find himself a hiding place near to Saul's capital, Gibeah. So he tells him, go down to the place where you hid yourself and remain by the stone Esau. And to the Hebrew reader, that's another point at which they're alarmed. They're alarmed because Esau means departure. Departure, separation between Jonathan, who must remain with his father, and David. Departure, the breaking of this friendship. And yet it's just the name of a stone, a rock, a hiding place which David can use. Did it already have that name? Was it given that name afterwards in memorial of what happened to David and Jonathan at this place? The reader is just warned of this problem. But Jonathan doesn't know that this is what's going to happen at Saul. He has to make plans either way. So he says, verse 20, "And I will shoot 3 arrows on the side thereof, as though I shot at a mark. I'll come out at the time when you've returned to that stone, and I daren't approach you, not if your life is in danger. I daren't draw any attention to you, but I'll come and I'll practice my archery just before the evening in that place. I'll take 3 arrows and I'll shoot them as if I'm shooting at a target. I'm not going to waste the arrows. I'm going to arrange for them to be collected after I've shot them." Verse 21, "And behold, I will send a lad, a young boy, saying, 'Go, find the arrows.' If I expressly say unto the lad, 'Behold, the arrows on this side of thee, take them.'" So he says, I'm going to shoot the arrows a short distance. If it's safe for David, I'm going to shoot them just a short distance so I can say, "They're on this side, take them, come back, there's no problem." "If you hear that, David," end of verse 21, "then come thou, for there is peace to thee and no hurt, as the Lord liveth." As certain as the fact that God is alive, if I say, "The arrows are near, come and take them," then you can come, because you're not in danger. Verse 22, "But if I say thus unto the young man, Behold, the arrows are beyond thee," Jonathan shot the arrows a far distance, so that the young man has to run and go a distance. "Behold, the arrows are beyond thee, go thy way, go away, go further." Well, if you hear that, David, then go thy way, you go too, because the Lord hath sent thee away. It's evidence that God wants you to go away and to leave Saul and not to return. Find your place of safety. Verse 23, "And as touching the matter which thou and I have spoken of," as touching, concerning the matter which we've discussed, the future of us, "Behold, the Lord be between thee and me forever." Concerning what we've said about the future, if we must separate forever, our friendship remains binding. Our friendship remains strong. Our promises before God remain binding. You must carry them out, David. And after my death, you must continue to care for my family. We've made a covenant. We've made serious promises of friendship in front of God. And you must keep those promises. God makes covenants too, doesn't he? He makes covenants with his people. He brings them into friendship with him and promises them that he will look after them for all time. And God, like Jonathan, like David, cares about those promises and keeps them in the future. In a moment, I'm going to read the section to you, but first my email address, 333kjv@gmail.com. I always ask you to tell me which country you're writing from. I also like to know if you're in the United States, then which of the states. It's 333kjv@gmail.com. And now here is the whole of the first book of Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 20 and verses 1 to 23. "And David fled from Naioth in Ramah, and came and said before Jonathan, What have I done? What is mine iniquity, and what is my sin before thy Father, that he seeketh my life? And he said unto him, God forbid. Thou shalt not die. Behold, my Father will do nothing, either great or small, but that he will shew it me. And why should my Father hide this thing from me? It's not so. And David sware moreover, and said, Thy Father certainly knoweth that I have found grace in thine eyes. And he saith, Let not Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But as truly as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, there is but a step between me and death. Then said Jonathan unto David, Whatsoever thy soul desireth, I will even do it for thee. And David said unto Jonathan, Behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king at meat. But let me go, that I may hide myself in the field unto the third day at even. If thy father at all miss me, then say, David earnestly asked leave of me, that he might run to Bethlehem, his city, for there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the family. If he say thus, It is well, thy servant shall have peace. But if he be very wroth, then be sure that evil is determined by him. Therefore thou shalt deal kindly with thy servant, for thou hast brought thy servant into a covenant of the Lord with thee. Notwithstanding, if there be in me iniquity, slay me thyself. For why shouldest thou bring me to thy father? And Jonathan said, Far be it from thee, for if I knew certainly that evil were determined by my father to come upon thee, then would I not tell it thee? Then said David to Jonathan, Who shall tell me? Or what if thy father answer thee roughly? And Jonathan said unto David, Come, and let us go out into the field. And they went out, both of them, into the field. And Jonathan said unto David, O Lord, God of Israel, when I have sounded my father about tomorrow any time or the third day, and behold, if there be good toward David, and I then send not unto thee, and shew it thee, the Lord do so and much more to Jonathan. But if it please my father to do thee evil, then I will shew it thee and send thee away, that thou mayest go in peace, and the Lord be with thee, as he hath been with my father. And thou shalt not only while yet I live shew me the kindness of the Lord, that I die not, but also thou shalt not cut off thy kindness from my house forever. No, not when the Lord hath cut off the enemies of David, every one from the face of the earth. So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, Let the Lord require it, let the Lord even require it at the hand of David's enemies. And Jonathan caused David to swear again, because he loved him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. Then Jonathan said to David, Tomorrow is the new moon, and thou shalt be missed, because thy seat will be empty. And when thou hast stayed 3 days, then thou shalt go down quickly, and come to the place where thou didst hide thyself when the business was in hand, and shalt remain by the stone Ezel. And I will shoot 3 arrows on the side thereof, as though I shot at a mark. And behold, I will send a lad, saying, Go, find the arrows. If I expressly say unto the lad, Behold, the arrows are on this side of thee, take them, then come thou, for there is peace to thee and no hurt, as the Lord liveth. But if I say thus unto the young man, Behold, the arrows are beyond thee, go thy way, for the Lord hath sent thee away. And as touching the matter which thou and I have spoken of, behold, the Lord be between thee and me forever.